Happy Thursday, everybody. My name is Steve, and welcome to Rank the World, the podcast where a young white guy shares what he thinks about a variety of topics in a tier list format, because that's exactly what the world needed more of. Now, for those of you listening for the first time, this is what I like to call a homemade podcast, meaning I'm not recording in a full studio. I do use a nice XLR microphone with an audio interface, but that's just about where the list of professional equipment ends. I'll do my best to minimize background noise, but you know what? If a car flies through a red light, or a train decides to wave hello from 5 miles away, or my neighbors start jumping up and down while I'm in the middle of talking, I'm not going to start the whole thing over. Sound like a deal? Okay. One last thing before we begin. If you enjoy this podcast and want to see more of what I make, go check out my links at allmylinks.com/derherrsturm. That's DERHERRSTURM. That's got links to my Twitch, my YouTube, my merch store over at Redbubble, and my Twitter, where you can stay up to date with what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. It's definitely not the same sort of content as you can listen to here, but who knows? You may find a thing or two worth enjoying. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. So coming up pretty soon here, we have an anniversary of sorts. Right around this time of year, a few years ago, was the first ever unveiling of the newest entry in the Smash Bros. Series, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now this entry specifically I hold really near and dear to my heart. I've met a lot of people that I really like through shared interest in this game, whether that be at a more competitive level or just what it stands for as a whole. Even more so, I would say this is one of the best polished games that the series has seen so far, and also it has one of the most expansive cast of characters in the entire series. So that being said, I wanted to do a quick tier list about how all the characters stack up against one another, more so in a competitive format. Now, normally we have a standard tier list, S being the best, F being the worst, but this time there is going to be no F tier, because, at least from my perspective, there are no bad characters in this game. There are just simply characters that do things a lot better than others. So without further ado, let's get started with Mario, the face of a large section of the video game franchise. The thing with Mario is he has a really good aerial combo game. He has really good movement both on the ground and in air, a lot of really good combo starters, whether it be grabs or tilt attacks, a lot of really good approach options, but he doesn't have a huge amount of spacing tools in a game that has a lot of characters that do. He has a little bit with stuff like his forward tilt being a little kick, his fireball for his neutral special. At the same time, though, he has a lot of really good, powerful options. So all things considered, Mario is an A-tier character. Next, we have Donkey Kong, one of many heavyweight characters we're going to be talking about today. The problem with heavyweight characters in this game is that even if they have good options in their kit, even if they have good movement or frame data, they are simply tanked by their large size, their large hitboxes. And Donkey Kong is no exception. He does have a decent amount of spacing tools with just how long his limbs, how big his hands are. Stuff like his back air being a little kick that comes out really quickly, can combo into itself pretty reliably. He has good options with his cargo throw, being able to carry characters off stage, and in some cases being able to come back from it. A lot of moves that spike, his side B also being able to ground opponents, break shields on stage, his down B slapping characters down into the blast zone, not even to mention his forward aerial. Definitely one of the better heavyweights in the game, but like I said before, with his big hitbox, he gets comboed decently easily. So I think for all those reasons, Donkey Kong is A B tier character. Next we have Link. Not Young Link, not Toon Link, we'll get to those later, but Link, the one with the blue shirt on. Me personally, I can't quite wrap my head around on how the Links, especially Adult Link, are as good as they are. They have a lot of really good spacing options with their projectiles, their arrow, their boomerang, and their timed bomb. Out of all three of the Links, I would say this Link's bomb is the best, just because of the potential to pretty much carry your opponent from one side of the stage to the other with mid-air Z-drops, just dropping the bomb in mid-air, causing a little bit of hit stun against your opponent, and then being able to go off from there. A decent amount of weight to him, a lot of decent spacing options with his sword as well. A really good neutral air as a out of shield option. Link has a very common neutral air that a lot of other characters have as well that are just really good. So I think all things considered, Link is another B tier character. Not bad by any means, but just sort of average in a lot of ways. Next we have Samus, and also by extension Dark Samus, our first Echo character, Echo fighter rather, of the day. Samus has a lot of good burst options, I think, a lot of really good projectiles with her neutral B, her missiles with her side B, a good number of mix-up options, especially with her down B, dropping like bombs midair, a nice, decently long-range tether grab, and all around is a really well-balanced character. You can do a good deal with Samus. If I'm honestly speaking, Samus is one of the better projectile characters in the game. So I think all things considered, I think Samus just barely makes it into A tier, along with Dark Samus. Next we have Kirby. I really want to place this character higher, I really do. Kirby has a lot of decent frame data, with stuff like his nair, a lot of his tilt attacks, but he doesn't have nearly the kill potential nor the reliability that a lot of other characters in the cast have, apart from some of the copy abilities that he can get with his neutral B. There aren't a whole lot of things you can do with Kirby's specials. He's borderline carried by his recoverability, his tilts, and his smash attacks, which albeit do have a lot of decent perks to them, aren't nearly enough to get Kirby out of C tier. Next we have Yoshi. This character doesn't make sense to me. This character does well in a lot of measurable aspects, but I simply cannot wrap my head around why Yoshi can do what he does as well as he does. His aerial game is really, really good. A lot of really good, well, not really good spacing options necessarily, but a lot of really good frame data, a lot of good strings and combos Yoshi can do. Not to mention, you cannot poke Yoshi's shield. I think Yoshi is the one character in the game that is exempt from that mechanic in the game. You can still break his shield, make no mistake about that, but you cannot poke his shield. So I think all things considered, Yoshi is an A tier character. Next we have Fox. I hate fighting Fox. Fox has really good frame data, a lot of really good combo potential, a lot of really good burst options. Whenever I fight a Fox, it feels like to me I don't know what Fox can throw at me, and by the time I realize what's happening, it is too late. So I think just because Fox is able to do that often, maybe I just don't know the matchup yet, which I probably don't, but I think all things considered, Fox is an S tier character. Next we have Pikachu, who I believe for a long time was the best character in the game. Before a lot of the DLC came out, a lot of the discussion was between Pikachu and Peach. I think it's Pikachu. Pikachu was the best character in the game, again, before the DLC came out. Much like Fox, a lot of really good frame data and combo potential, not as reliable of a recovery as Fox has. Maybe it's just me not being able to get that technique down right. It's good recovery, but I would say outclassed by Fox in that regard. But other than that, really, really good character. Really good, reliable kill options. Really good, reliable combo starters. And a really good air game. So I think all things considered, Pikachu is another S tier character. Next we have Luigi, who I think is a really fun, really goofy, terrifying character in this game. Pretty much the majority of Luigi's utility in this game is dependent on whether or not you can reliably get grabs. Like Samus, Luigi has a tether grab, comes out a little bit quicker, and you can do so much more out of Luigi's grab than you can do with Samus. I keep seeing a lot of 0 to deaths and really deadly combos with Luigi. And quite honestly, I'm so glad he has it. He deserves it. He's such a fun little goofy guy. At the same time, though, I think without that, if you're able to get around that grab game, Luigi starts to fall apart a little bit. It's still solid, not quite as good of a combo game as Mario without that grab, but still very good, very respectable. So I think all things considered, Luigi is an A tier character. Next we have Ness. Oh boy, it's Ness. I don't know how to feel about Ness. Again, a lot of really good spacing options with his projectiles, a lot of good ledge trapping utility with his yo-yo smash attacks. Just because of how he works in the air, as well as how his moves work in the air, he has a lot of really good edge guarding techniques as well. He can carry you pretty far off the stage if you're not careful. And to a lot of people, he is really annoying to fight. Not me personally, but a lot of people hate fighting Ness, and I think that is indicative of how good his kit is to use. So once again, we have another entry into A tier. Next we have Captain Falcon, which to me feels like Fox, but not as fast-paced and a bit stronger, like physically stronger. I think because a lot of his options are slightly slower and just a little bit easier to react to, I don't think Captain Falcon quite gets into S tier, but he's still really good. A really good combo starter is a really good combo game. A decent ability to ledge trap and edge guard. And honestly, is just an awesome character. So I think all things considered, Captain Falcon is an A tier character. Next we have Jigglypuff, which I can pretty much summarize as Kirby, but with a little bit better of a kit, a little bit better of an aerial game, no copy ability, but with some really good options to borderline carry your opponent across the stage and into the blast zone. So while I don't think Jigglypuff is quite good enough to make it into B tier, Jigglypuff is a solid C tier character. Next we have Peach and Daisy. One of the most powerful things I think that she gets access to, both of them, is the ability to float in midair. That in tandem with their projectile, with Turnip, really gives Peach and Daisy a very powerful and very dangerous Z-drop combo game to carry characters from one side of the stage to the other and even further into the blast zone. And I think because of that, in addition to the frame data of her aerial attacks, her slightly above decent movement speed on the ground, not even to mention in the air, I think all around Peach and Daisy are two S tier characters. Next we have Bowser, who I think is the best heavyweight in the game, if we're not counting Kazuya. Me personally, I don't count Kazuya as a heavyweight. He's something else. The two things that really exemplify Bowser's kit are, well, actually three things. One, he gets an innate passive tough guy, where some combo starters and things that would hinder a lot of other heavyweights just simply don't apply to Bowser. He can just tough through them. Really good frame data on a lot of his powerful moves, like forward tilt, really good out of shield option with his up B, and just his movement and aerial speed. So I think all things considered, Bowser, I can't put him in A tier, but I can certainly put him at the higher end of B tier. Next, we have the Ice Climbers. They were a menace in previous entries in the series. Not so much in Ultimate. A lot of what was their most dangerous aspect, their desync and grab infinites, just simply are not here in Ultimate. And although they do have like some decently powerful stuff in their kit with their aerials and their tilt attacks, I don't know, I can't in good conscience put the Ices any higher than C tier. Next we have Sheik, another character that I really do not like to play against. Much like Fox, Sheik has a lot of moves in their kit that combo really good into one another and are not easy to read or get out of. Sheik is one of those characters that takes a great deal of know-how and patience, I believe, to counter effectively. And I think because of that, because of how good their frame data is, and a lot of the options that they have to control the stage, I think Sheik is a solid A tier character. Zelda, on the other hand, not so much, although she does have options to control one side of the stage from the entire other side. They are very easy to telegraph, not especially difficult to counter, and although she does have some good options with her aerials, with some of her tilt attacks, I don't think any of them are quite good enough to get Zelda out of C tier. Next we have Dr. Mario, who is pretty much Mario, but slower movement speed, heavier, and not nearly as good of a recovery or combo game. Although the additional power that Dr. Mario gets behind his moves is very nice and very useful, just because of how important movement and recoverability is in this game, I can't in good conscience put Dr. Mario any higher than D tier. He is a lot of fun. I really enjoy both playing and fighting him, but in the grand scheme of characters in this game, he is simply not very good. Next we have Pichu, who, much like Dr. Mario is to Mario, is Pikachu, but not as good. Although Pichu does have a smaller hitbox, and I think is a little bit faster than Pikachu, a vast majority of Pichu's moves damage itself. And given how lightweight of a character Pichu is, that is not a good thing to have. A lot of the moves that don't damage Pichu, although they have decent frame data and, don't do nothing against the opponent, the fact that Pichu has to take damage in order to do damage for the vast majority of his combo and kill options, I can't in good conscience put Pichu any higher than C tier. Next we have Falco. I don't like Falco either, but Falco is really good. I don't think Falco is quite as good as Fox or Wolf, who we'll be talking about later, but Falco has a lot of really good kill options, a lot of really good aerial mobility. He can control a lot of the stage because of it, and a lot of really good frame data. So I think all things considered, Falco is an A tier character. Next we have Marth and Lucina. Probably the two Echo Fighter and main fighter duos that are going to be spaced the furthest on the tier list. They have very similar kits, but with one clear difference. Marth has Tipper, and Lucina does not. Now what Tipper is it's pretty much what it sounds like. At the tip of Marth's sword does the most damage, and closer to the base of the sword does not. Lucina, rather, has consistent damage across the entirety of her sword's blade. Now because of that, Marth has to be very, very careful about where he places himself in relation to his opponent. Lucina doesn't have to do that as much, and I think because of that difference between the two, it puts Marth in C tier and Lucina in A tier. At its base, really good kit, really good combo utility, really good spacing options, really good recovery options, but Tipper just makes the difference, man. Next we have Young Link, very similar to Link and Toon Link in a lot of ways. Smaller hitbox than Link. I don't think young Link does as much damage as normal Link does, but because of that, you also get slightly faster move speed. You get a tether grab with young Link's little hook shot. And although I think young Link is the best out of the 3 Links, I don't think it's big enough of a difference to break young Link into A tier, so into B tier it shall go. Next we have Ganondorf, which, as much as I hate to say it, is probably the worst character in the game, because although he is vastly improved over all the other times he's made an appearance in the series, his really big hitbox and slow movement speed, even though it's been improved, is just not enough to really make a difference against the rest of the cast. To Ganondorf's credit, he does have some decent string options. His neutral air is not a very good, but it's a good move. But I don't know. I can't in good conscience put Ganondorf any higher than D tier. Again, I do not believe there are any bad characters in this game, but in the scheme of the rest of the roster, Ganondorf just is not very good. Next we have Mewtwo. I don't have much to say about Mewtwo. I don't think his larger hitbox works especially in his favor. I don't think his weight class works too much in his favor, although Mewtwo does have some decent burst options and some decent camping capabilities. I don't know. I don't see a world in which Mewtwo is as bad as C tier or as good as A tier, so B tier is where Mewtwo shall go. Next we have Marth and his Echo Fighter Chrom. Wait, no, not Marth, Roy. Now, much like Marth and Lucina are different with that tipper mechanic, it sort of works in reverse for Roy and Chrom. While Chrom has consistent damage across his entire blade, Roy does the most damage at the base of it. And because of that, Roy is a really good rushdown character with some decent camp capabilities based on his movement speed, and also having a different recovery option with his up B. I would say Roy is an S tier character, and Chrom is a B tier character. Not as big, I would say, of a playstyle gap as Marth is to Lucina, but it's still significant. I can't quite put my finger on what it is about Chrom that makes him not nearly as good as Roy, apart from the reverse tipper mechanic. I don't know, I just can't quite wrap my head around why Chrom isn't nearly as good as Roy, but I just know that he isn't. Next we have Mr. Game & Watch, who I would say has one of, if not the best recovery options in the game. I don't think very many moves in the entire game can beat out Game & Watch's up B, especially out of shield. Game & Watch, I would say, suffers, but it's not really suffering since it's really good from really good frame data. His tilt attacks, especially his forward tilt, a lot of his smash attacks, a lot of his aerials come out really quickly, and some of them have really good disjoints that work very much to Game & Watch's advantage. So I think for all those reasons, Mr. Game & Watch is an S tier character. Meta Knight, on the other hand, not so much. Where a lot of sword characters have decent spacing options, because of the length of Meta Knight's sword, he does not have this perk. To his credit, he does have a smaller hitbox, he does move fairly quickly, he has some decent laddering options off stage just because of how many jumps he has and how quickly his aerials can come out. Meta Knight just does not have very many super reliable kill options. So I think for all those reasons, Meta Knight is a C tier character. Next we have Pit and Dark Pit. Now, apart from how their side Bs work and how you can manipulate the motion of their arrows with neutral B, there isn't a whole lot different about these two characters. To me at least, they're kind of boring but that's really because of how reliable and how simple a lot of their combo games and a lot of their kill options are. So although both of them are very decent, very honest characters, I don't think either of them are truly remarkable at anything that they do. So for those reasons, I'm going to be putting both Pit and Dark Pit into B tier. Next we have Zero Suit Samus. I would say that Zero Suit Samus is extremely similar to Sheik, but with a bit better disjoints and zoning capabilities. I expected to have more to say about that, but I don't, so all things considered, I would say Zero Suit Samus is an A tier character. Next, we have Wario, who I am very glad is as good as he is, because he is just a goofy character, and I love seeing him do what he does, just because of how silly and goofy and nuts he is. Where he really excels is his air game, I would say. He can have a decent amount of mix-up potential, but I think really where Wario excels are his aerials and his air game, like I said before. His neutral air, if you space it right, can carry characters from one side of the stage to the other. His back air is a really good kill option. Waft is a really good kill option if you use it properly. And all in all, Wario is a very solid character. I don't think he's quite good enough to make it into S tier, but I would say he's a solid A tier character. Next, we have Snake. Now, Snake is, I would say, similar to one other character in this roster, just because of how his kit allows him to play. He very much relies on setting up stage control that will pay off later. And I think because of how few characters in the roster work that way, unless you fight Snake a lot, or unless you are really good at paying attention right off the bat, Snake is a very difficult character to combat properly. Not even to mention how quickly a lot of his moves come out, how powerful they are, as well as the quality of his aerial game. Shoot, I can't even put into words how good this character is. Snake is a solid S tier pick. Next, we have Ike. When this game first came out, Ike, I believe, was really good. Not one of the best characters in the game, but really good. Unfortunately, as this game and its meta have evolved, I don't think Ike has aged incredibly well. Because of the size and power of his sword, he has really good, not really good, but good spacing options. His aerials pretty much define his character and playstyle, I think. Albeit, his tilts are really good too. Smash attacks, not so much. Recovery, if you know what you're doing, can be counteracted without much difficulty. So I think all things considered, Ike is a B tier character. Next we have Pokemon Trainer, which is pretty much 3 characters in one that you can switch between. Each of these 3 characters, Squirtle, Bulbasaur, and Charizard, do things differently from the rest, are of different weight, movement speed, and power classes. And I think because of that specifically, there are a lot of options that Pokemon Trainer has that the rest of the cast simply don't. So we'll get into Squirtle, Bulbasaur, and Charizard in a minute here, but I think just collectively under the banner of Pokemon Trainer, all 3 of them are in A tier. Now for Squirtle, pretty much I would say Squirtle is a smaller, water-themed Mario, based on the potential of his movement speed and the potential of his combo game and aerial game. So I think for those reasons, Squirtle is an A tier character. Bulbasaur really relies on spacing and not quite camping, but a lot of Bulbasaur's utility, I would say, relies on usage of Razor Leaf, which is a pretty good projectile that Ivysaur has to their disposal. Aerials are pretty good too. Pretty good combo game with all of those. Smash attacks are decent, but I would say Ivysaur's smash attacks are outclassed by Squirtle in terms of how quickly they come out and Charizard in terms of power. So I think, again, Ivysaur is an A tier character. Charizard, unfortunately suffers a lot of the drawbacks that heavyweight characters have. Really large hitbox, not phenomenal recovery. It's better than some heavyweights, but it's not one of the best in the game either. Charizard does have some decent aerials. Well, not decent, they're good aerials. Decent smash attacks, very powerful. And although Charizard doesn't have Tough Guy, Charizard does have some of the tools that Bowser gets that are pretty good for racking damage, specifically with Flamethrower. So I think, unfortunately, Charizard can't break it out of B tier into A tier, although the access that Pokemon Trainer has to Squirtle and Ivysaur very much makes it a solid A tier character. Next we have Diddy Kong. I don't have too much to say about Diddy Kong apart from really good frame data, some pretty good disjoint options. I think Diddy Kong very much excels at ledge trapping, and Banana Peel is a very useful option for Diddy Kong to have. So I think all things considered, Diddy Kong is a solid A tier character. Lucas I would describe as a slightly more unorthodox, and I think because of that, unfortunately, a slightly worse Ness. It's just minor changes, like his aerials are a bit different than Ness's, his back air I know spikes, his smash attacks are different, and because of that, ledge trapping with Lucas works a little bit differently. The way PK Fire works in the air is different. So I think although Lucas is a good zoner, I don't know. You know what? Yeah, I can in good conscience put Lucas in A tier. Not as good as Ness, but still very solid character. Next we have Sonic. Man oh man, can this character get really annoying to deal with. Really good aerials, better smash attacks and disjoints than really makes sense. Phenomenal movement speed, can get from one side of the stage to the other in really no time at all. If memory serves correctly, Sonic is the fastest character in the game, and for good reason. Sonic simply gets away with a lot just because of how fast he is. And I think for those reasons, Sonic is an S tier character. Next we have King Dedede. Although he has some decent disjoint options, some of his moves come out very quickly and are decently reliable. Gordo, I would say, although it's a useful move to have in his kit, because of the fact that it can be knocked back at him, I don't think it's a super reliable option. And I think Dedede's utility suffers because of it. So although he has pretty good recovery and spacing capabilities, I don't know, I can't in good conscience put Dedede any higher than C tier. Next we have Olimar. I don't understand how Olimar works, all I know is that he's a solid A tier character. Next we have Lucario. Now the thing with Lucario is, although he has decent aerial options, decent combo potential, the mechanic that sets Lucario apart from the rest of the cast relies on Lucario being at a high amount of damage. And when going up against a good majority of the cast, you don't want to be at high percents. So I think just because of that innate nature, the more percent that Lucario racks up on themselves, the better that Lucario does, really makes Lucario not a tremendously reliable character to use. Although there are some really cool things you can do with Lucario. Again, like Dedede, I can't in good conscience put Lucario any higher than C tier. Next we have Rob. Tremendous frame data, really good aerials to use, especially neutral air, forward air, up air. Some pretty good projectiles at Rob's disposal, especially Gyro and their laser beam. Pretty good reflect with their side B. That can rack up some decent damage and kill potential too. Pretty good smash attacks as well, just as long as you utilize them correctly. All in all, I don't see much reason why Rob shouldn't be an S tier. So there they go, S tier. Next we have Toon Link. I think in terms of kill potential, Toon Link is the most unorthodox out of all the links. Although Toon Link does share a lot of the good zoning options that Young Link and Adult Link have, I think just because of the smaller range Toon Link has with his kill options that isn't shared by Link and not quite to the same extent with Young Link, I don't know. As I've said before with a lot of other characters, I can't in good conscience put Toon Link any higher than C tier. Next we have Wolf. Really solid combo potentials with Wolf's claw disjoints, especially his forward air, his up air, a really powerful kill option with back air, with forward smash, which in most cases is safe on shield, a really good spacing tool with neutral B, a really nice, fast, reliable option with neutral air. All in all, Wolf is a solid S tier character. There are a lot of really good options in his kit, and it's fairly easy to utilize them well. Next, we have Villager. I don't know how people get as good with this character as they do. In the grand scheme of things, Villager isn't the best character by a long shot. Although both Villager and Isabelle a little bit too do have some really good mix-up options. I don't know, I can't in good conscience put Villager any higher than B tier. Slingshot, forward air, and back air are pretty good. Turnips, both for up air and down air, although they're not super reliable, can be good in their own regard. Tree is a pretty decent mix-up option, especially at ledge. Camping at ledge with forward smash is, although, if you ask me, kind of cheap, it is not easy to work around. I don't know, there's just something missing about Villager's kit that's also missing with Isabelle's, but we'll talk about that later. Next we have Mega Man. Very solid zoning options, especially with forward smash, with down B, with saw blade. A lot of really good frame data for moves like his up tilt, his aerials. Although I wouldn't say the best zoner in the game, Mega Man is still really good. And I think for all those reasons and more, Mega Man is a solid A tier character. Next we have Wii Fit Trainer. This character really annoys me. Maybe I simply don't know the matchup or how this character works. Wii Fit gets a lot of really good frame data, especially with her tilts, with her aerial attacks. But I don't know, I can't in good conscience put Wii Fit Trainer any higher than B tier. Similar story for Rosalina and Luna, very solid B tier character I'd say. The spacing opportunities that Luma provides, although they're not as consistent, I would say, as a long-staying tool as Nana is for ice climbers, I would say Luma is a lot more versatile than Nana is. And I don't know, I think because of that, it really sets Rosalina an entire tier above ice climbers. Next, we have Little Mac. Although he is very fast on stage, gets really good and helpful armor on a lot of his smash attacks, and has some pretty decent frame data on a lot of his grounded moves, Little Mac cannot survive in the air. And I think because of how heavily utilized aerial games are in this game, Little Mac simply cannot stand up to the rest of the cast as well as he would otherwise. Not even to mention, I would say he has one of the worst recoveries in the game. So I think all things considered, although he isn't quite as bad as Ganondorf, he very much enjoys the perks of having high ground movement speed. Little Mac is a D tier character. Next we have Greninja. I know a lot of people who swear up and down that Greninja is a top 10, top 15 character. I don't think Greninja is quite that good, although Greninja does have very solid quick kill options and a lot of really good potential with how quickly a lot of his moves come out and how quickly Greninja can traverse both the air and the stage. So I think for all those reasons, Greninja is a solid A tier character. Next we have Mii Brawler. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Mii Brawler is one of the best characters in the game. I'm not ESAM, I'm not bald yet. I don't think by any means that Mii Brawler is one of the worst characters in the game. I think the frame data that is permitted to a lot of Brawler's aerials and tilts gives them a decent amount of potential. At the same time, I think in all of those regards, there are simply characters that can do what Mii Brawler does better. And all things considered, Mii Brawler I would say is a solid C tier character. Similar story with Mii Sword Fighter, although Mii Sword Fighter doesn't have nearly the same versatility that Mii Brawler has. Sword Fighter still, to its own merit, has some good options at its disposal. So again, C tier character. Once again, similar story with Mii Gunner. Mii Gunner has some decent options at their disposal, but once again, alongside Mii Brawler, and although I didn't say it yet, but Mii Sword Fighter as well, there are simply other characters in the cast that have some of the qualities that Mii Gunner has, but better. So I think for those reasons, really all three of the Mii characters are C tier characters. Next we have Palutena. I would say Palutena is a very dangerous character. A good number of her moves have intangibility on them, mainly because of the shield she has on her arm, moves like dash attack, back air, and the frame data and hitboxes on a lot of her moves, especially her neutral air and up air, do give her a very dangerous amount of combo potential and kill potential. Unlike a lot of other characters in the game, I would say it's very easy for Palutena to gain stage control, and once she has it, it's not easy to get it back. So I think for all those reasons, Palutena is a solid S tier character. Pac-Man? I would say Pac-Man is the best of both worlds between a zoner character and Mario. Although Pac-Man doesn't quite have the same vertical combo potential that Mario has, horizontally, it is really good. Fire Hydrant gives a lot of mix-up options, and just in tandem with the variety of projectiles that Pac-Man has at his disposal, as well as a lot of the frame data that his tilt attacks, the range of his grab, and the utility of his aerials provides, I don't think Pac-Man is quite S tier, but if nothing else, Pac-Man is incredibly high in A tier. Next we have Robin. I would say Robin is pretty much Ness in terms of utility. Not necessarily the same characteristics about their moveset, but in terms of like general utility with their moveset, they are decently similar, but Robin is significantly slower and has a short sword. So although it does allow for some decent disjoints, much like with other sword characters, I think because of the length of Robin's sword and the fact that they have two distinct swords that I'm not sure how much you can control, whether you use one or the other. I know there's certainly some measurable aspect to it, but I haven't figured it out yet. I think because of that, simply Robin is less consistent and less useful than characters like Ness or Lucas. So I think all things considered, Robin is a C tier character. Next we have Shulk. Shulk's neutral B, Monado arts, does allow for not a super big variety, but a decent enough variety of changes to his playstyle that keep the opponent guessing and also can be really good situational switch-ups for Shulk as a player. Albeit, depending on what Monado art Shulk is using, it can be reasonably simple for an opponent to figure out what Shulk is going to try to go for, but at the same time, the frame data and hitboxes allowed by Shulk's moveset do allow for a decent amount of wiggle room there. So I think all things considered, Shulk is an A tier character. Next we have Bowser Jr. I'm not quite sure what to say about Bowser Jr. He does have a fair amount of decent options at his disposal, but I can't think of any real metrics that Bowser Jr. excels over most other characters. So although there are some interesting things you can do with this character, especially in terms of the usage of Mecha Koopa and Cannonball with the usage of his grab and aerials, I don't know. I don't see a world right now where Bowser Jr. gets placed higher than C tier. Similar story with the Duck Hunt duo. Although Duck Hunt has a very rare and solid frame 1 get off me option with Can, I don't know, with a lot of the moves in Duck Hunt's kit, it struggles to have as much utility as a lot of other characters in the cast. So although they do have a fair share of disjoints and decent frame data, I can't in good conscience put them any higher than C tier. Next we have Ryu and Ken. Not a huge amount of differences between these two. Their side B, their little spin kick attack. Ken's is a multi-hit while Ryu's is just one. I would say Ryu is slower and hits harder, vice versa for Ken. Although these characters do have fairly useful kits and a very useful, at least in 1v1s, passive ability with auto turnaround, I can't in good conscience put them any higher than B tier. Now Cloud, while he isn't nearly as oppressively good of a character as he was in Smash 4, Cloud still has really solid options with his kit. Limit Break, again, is a very useful tool if you manage it correctly. A lot of his specials and out-of-shield options are very solid. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but very solid kill options as well. Although his recovery is nothing really to write home about, it is usable enough to keep Cloud, I think, in A tier. Next we have Corrin. Similar story to Cloud in terms of translation from Smash 4 to Ultimate, although I think for Corrin there was a much more significant drop-off in terms of how good the character is between those two entries in the series. Although Corrin does have some useful tools in their kit, such as their aerials and their recovery, I don't think Corrin lands any higher than C tier. As for Bayonetta, where she excelled and borderline controlled the meta in Smash for Wii U and 3DS, it's not so much in Ultimate. While she does still maintain some combo potential, it is not nearly to the extent and the lethality as it was in Smash for Wii U. So I think for those reasons, Bayonetta is a B tier character. Next we have Inkling. I would say, in terms of utility and playstyle, is very similar to Squirtle and Mario, while also having a unique mechanic with ink. Inkling has a good amount of moves in their kit that can splatter their opponent with ink, and the more ink that's on the opponent, the more damage they take from Inkling's moves. So I think at the end of the day, Inkling is a solid A tier character. Next we have Ridley. While Ridley does have some of the drawbacks of a large character, note how I said large character and not heavyweight, in terms of having a large hitbox, Ridley does not have nearly the amount of weight and then by extension survivability that other really large characters have in this game. So although Ridley does have some good string options, a lot of decent aerial options, a lot of things that Ridley can do, unfortunately, because of a lower amount of survivability, I don't think Ridley makes it out of C tier. Next we have Simon and Richter Belmont. In terms of what's different between the two of them, I think it's very similar to Marth and Lucina. One of the Belmonts has a sort of tipper mechanic with their whip, the other one doesn't. However, unlike Marth and Lucina, I don't think this creates a big disparity in how good they are as characters. Although they have some really decent projectile options, because of how those projectiles behave, it can be decently easy to work around. And although a lot of those projectiles can lead into each other and other moves in their kits decently well, because of how relatively easy it can be to navigate around those projectiles, I don't think either of the Belmonts make it out of B tier. Next we have King K. Rool. When this game first came out, King K. Rool was a menace, mainly because of three factors. His belly armor as a mechanic made it really easy to bully past a lot of other characters' options against King K. Rool. His recovery was really hard to work against, especially if you were recovering from beneath the stage. And simply, people did not yet know the matchup. Nowadays, Most of those points are not the case anymore. K. Rool has since gone through a number of nerfs, although he does have some good pieces of his kit, such as Crown, which, while throwing, gives him super armor. Cannonball as a projectile can be good to use if you space yourself around it properly. Decently powerful kill options when you can use them. But a lot of King K. Rool's potential as a character is overshadowed by how his large hitbox makes him really susceptible to strings and combos from other characters. Depending on how you place yourself as K. Rool, belly armor can help this a little bit, but not nearly enough to get K. Rool out of C tier. Next we have Isabelle, who I would say is a decent mashup between the playstyles of Villager and Snake. Now I say Snake mainly because of Isabelle's down B, which works very similarly to Snake's down B, but is also different in a very crucial aspect. Whereas Snake can use his down B in the air to drop a little thing of C4 that will fall and is really hard to detect if you don't know what's going on. You can't do that with Isabelle. With Isabelle, you plant a Lloyd rocket in the ground, and then if an opponent goes near it and triggers it, they're then caught up by it. Because of how difficult it is to detect snakes, it is a very deadly option in his kit. Because of how easy it is to detect Isabelle's, both in terms of how it's telegraphed and how it looks on the stage itself, unless you are being really, really reckless, it is not especially difficult to avoid Isabelle's Lloyd rocket. Again, in terms of moveset, Isabelle shares a lot of the same qualities as Villager, but because Isabelle doesn't have the mix-up option of tree and axe that Villager has, instead it being replaced with Lloyd rocket. Although she does have some decent trapping options with fishhook, I don't know, I can't in good conscience put Isabelle any higher than C tier. Next we have Incineroar. He is incredibly slow, but at the same time, he can hit decently hard. Some of his moves, especially his command grab, are not super easy to work around and come out fairly quickly. Not his command grab, but other moves like his neutral air, his forward air. Although he has a decent kit at his disposal, because of his size and because of his movement speed, Incineroar can't really take advantage of that kit nearly as well as he could have otherwise. So although it's solid, I don't think it's good enough to go any higher than B tier. Next we have Piranha Plant. Although Piranha Plant does have some decent spacing options with Patui and down B, none of the moves in Piranha Plant's kit are especially remarkable. Although they do have their utility in some situations, there are quite simply other characters that can do what Piranha Plant does better. Maybe not all at the same time, but mainly because of Piranha Plant's weight and movement speed. I don't know. I don't think Piranha Plant lands any higher than C tier. Next we have Joker. I have one word for Joker: Arsene. Because of Arsene, and because of how good Joker's frame data is, how good his kill options are, how reliable his kill options are, Joker is one of the best characters in the game, and because of that, is a no-brainer for S tier. Next we have Hero. Not quite as good as other sword characters or as other spellcasters, just because of the sheer amount of options at Hero's disposal. It can get frustrating at times to work around what Hero can do. So for all those reasons, Hero, I would say, is an A tier character. Next we have Banjo and Kazooie. I can summarize Banjo and Kazooie as the Duck Hunt duo without the frame 1 option that they had. Although they have a, on paper, decently strong move with Wonder Wing, it is shockingly easy to work around it unless it takes you by surprise, which very rarely happens. Although Banjo and Kazooie do have 2 decent zoning options with eggs and their grenades, quite simply put, there are other characters that do what Banjo and Kazooie are capable of better. and it is not difficult to work around what Banjo and Kazooie are capable of throwing at you. So for all those reasons, Banjo and Kazooie are C tier characters. Next we have Terry. I am not an expert on Terry, but I've seen a lot of what Terry can do, and although Terry isn't the greatest fighting game character in the roster, a lot of the kill options, a lot of the combos, and a lot of the frame data that he has makes him a solid A tier character. Next we have Byleth. Although some high-level players, especially MKLeo, have done really good with Byleth, I don't think Byleth is quite as good as a lot of people make them out to be. Admittedly, Byleth has some really good spacing options with moves like forward air, with moves like forward smash, with moves like up air and up smash. Byleth does have some decent combo games with neutral air and up B. Because of Byleth's movement speed, I think Byleth's potential is hindered just a little bit. But at the same time, I would say that Byleth is a solid A tier character. Next we have Min Min. I don't like Min Min. Much like Fox and Sheik, it can get really annoying at times to fight a good Min Min who knows what they're doing. That mainly comes at the variety of different weapon types that she can throw at the opponent, especially with how safe edgeguarding can be with Min Min, just in terms of her base range as well as the added range you can get with Dragon's Breath. Although it is not impossible to circumvent Min Min's range and her options, it is a very tedious process that takes a lot of patience. So I think for those reasons, Min Min is an S tier character. Next we have Steve, who I think at this point there is little argument against Steve being the best character in the game. Since before the character came out, I knew that Steve was going to be a very powerful member of the cast, because much like Snake, his unorthodox moveset and tools at his disposal, especially with block building, really set him apart from the rest of the cast in how he played. And I think the way the Steve meta developed nearly perfectly proved what I thought was going to come to pass, which can pretty much be summed up as Steve does not have to play the game the way you want him to, and because of that, the opponent really has to adapt to play the way that Steve wants to. But I think the real tipping point that set Steve apart as the best character in the game was a tech, whether it was knowingly put in the game or left in there by mistake, which allows Steve to ignore a vast majority, if not all, hit stun potential in the game. And then he can do pretty much whatever he wants out of that. So I don't think I need to discuss it any longer. The uproars and movements to ban Steve in a lot of regions competitively can speak for themselves. Steve is an S tier character. Next we have Sephiroth. Now although his speed and the range options he has at his disposal with tools, mainly his sword, but also his projectiles, although a lot of those options are very linear, Sephiroth can move a decent amount to cover for that. I would say the main thing that keeps Sephiroth out of being placed any higher is how light he is, and because of that, how easy to kill he can be. Now, if you're really good with movements and mix-ups, you can prolong Sephiroth's longevity by a decent amount, but because of how linear his moveset can be, and how easy he can be to kill, I can't in good conscience put Sephiroth any higher than A tier. Next we have Pyra and Mithra, who before this game-breaking tech was discovered for Steve, was in contention for one of the best characters in the game. And that mainly came down to how the difference in stats, abilities, and playstyles between Pyra and Mithra allowed for a player to mix up their playstyle. Although they do have some core tenets of their gameplay the same in terms of like their aerials, how they work as a sword character, the fact that Mithra, although being lighter, does have a lot more speed and better frame data than Pyra does, allows for a sort of playstyle where you rack up damage quickly and reliably with Mithra, and then you go in for the kill with Pyra. So I think for all these reasons, although they are not unbeatable by any means, it takes a significant amount of know-how and counterplay to successfully defeat Pyra and Mithra. So for those reasons, they are an S tier character. Next we have Kazuya Mishima, the best fighting game character in this game, which is mainly due to the vast amount of moves at his disposal, how difficult it can be to telegraph those moves, and how easily those moves can combo into one another. Apart from Luigi and maybe Joker and maybe Steve, Kazuya is the one character that comes to mind when I think of the term zero to death combo. Much like Pyra and Mithra, although he is not undefeatable, he still has a very powerful set of tools in his kit, and because of that, at times be a very difficult character to beat. So I think for all those reasons, Kazuya Mishima is an S tier character. And then finally we have Sora. While Sora does have a wide variety of tools at his disposal, especially in the air, because of how unorthodox his movement style can be at times, as well as how light of a character he is, I don't think Sora can capitalize on those aerial combo points of potential nearly as good as characters like Bayonetta were able to in the past. So I think although Sora does have some decent potential in his kit, they just can't be utilized to their fullest extent, at least not in the state that the game is in right now. So I think for all those reasons, Sora is a B tier character. And with that, the tier list is complete. In D tier, we have Dr. Mario, Little Mac, and Ganondorf. In C tier, we have Ridley, King K. Rool, Piranha Plant, Jigglypuff, Kirby, Ice Climbers, Zelda, Pichu, Marth, Meta Knight, Mii Brawler, Sword Fighter, and Gunner, King Dedede, Lucario, Toon Link, Robin, Bowser Jr., the Duck Hunt Duo, Corrin, Isabelle, and Banjo and Kazooie. In B tier, we have Bowser, Charizard, Donkey Kong, Young Link, Link, Mewtwo, Chrom, Pit and Dark Pit, Ike, Villager, Wii Fit Trainer, Rosalina and Luma, Ryu, Ken, Bayonetta, Simon, Richter, Incineroar, and Sora. In A tier, we have Cloud, Pac-Man, Squirtle, Mario, Samus, Dark Samus, Yoshi, Luigi, Ness, Lucas, Captain Falcon, Sheik, Falco, Lucina, Zero Suit Samus, Wario, Greninja, Pokemon Trainer, Ivysaur, Diddy Kong, Olimar, Mega Man, Shulk, Inkling, Hero, Terry, Byleth, and Sephiroth. At an S tier, we have Steve, Joker, Fox, Pikachu, Peach, Daisy, Roy, Mr. Game & Watch, Snake, Sonic, Rob, Wolf, Palutena, Min, Pyra and Mithra, and Kazuya Mishima. An additional point of note, in a lot of Smash character tier lists, a lot of people like to order the characters in their tiers based on whether or not one character in that tier is better than the other. I haven't done that with this tier list. These tiers are unordered. And that's about it for this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, feel free to subscribe and follow the podcast on your platform of choice, including Spotify, YouTube, Pocket Casts, and Anchor. I'm not sure if I'll be back next week. We'll see how recording and editing for this episode goes, as well as my schedule for this following next couple weeks. I've got midterms coming up. But if nothing else, the week after next, I'll be back with another episode with another new topic. But until we meet again, you all have yourselves a damn good one.